So in this week's Creative Confidence Catch Up, today I'm going to be chatting with Kay Reeve. So Kay, would you like to tell us a bit about yourself?
Hello, yes, thank you. Hi, Amy. I'm an emotional awareness expert. I also do a lot of work with mindfulness, and that comes from my experience of raising a neurodivergent teenager with suicidal depression. So on the one hand, I do a lot of work with self-help books and self-help strategies, but as a parent, I was really sort of grateful to understand about mindfulness, and it kept me afloat while I was keeping him afloat. So that's kind of where I come in with the two angles of self-help and mindfulness.
That's great, like really great intro. So my first question to you today is, so have you always been like confident in putting yourself out there, whether it be your voice, your opinions, and when was that confidence sparked once you got it?
Wow. Confidence has been on very different levels, very often at the same time. Because when I was raising a child who was suicidally depressed, I was more than confident as a parent to speak up on it, for him, to support him. But at the same time, when I had very little support coming back, there was also a lot of stress, anxiety, and overwhelm that I had to deal with through those years. And some areas where I wasn't so confident in, like, how to help him through those years. And in the end, it was just keep pushing and pushing, and sheer resilience, and say through learning mindfulness and keeping me calm, that eventually, by the time he was 20 years old, I created a strategy to help him understand his emotions. I realized he couldn't understand his emotions because he couldn't see them. And that's where my years of personal development that I'd worked on for myself, mixed with my own creativity and outside the box thinking, kind of all just pulled the universe together and come up with an answer for him or a solution.
Wow,
Yeah.
isn't it funny though? I don't know if you felt it, but I've felt that like in the past, like you'll get, and I actually wrote a social post on it, where it was about like with all the different skills sets that we've got and we gain throughout the years, you don't actually realize until a certain point in your life that all of these skills you've needed in order to get where you are now.
Oh, exactly. I've used that a lot. Hence, my mindfulness books bring a lot of that together for me, keeping calm as a parent. For example, I've got one of my notebook covers here, Calming Chamomile. This is my own photography.
Oh,
And
nice.
my books, I love writing, I love the mindfulness, and I like creating books. I mentor other self-help authors as well now. So I love books. I've always grown up loving books, and my son does as well. So I've got two here. I've got Bumblebee one as well. But I've got 12 different notebook design covers. But like you're saying about being creative, bringing it all together, I've been through my own depression as well. After helping my son, I had a really difficult few years since we'd last spoken, actually. I'd got divorced, lost my home, ended up homeless temporarily. I finally moved in on my own for the first time in my life I'd ever lived alone. And because we got put in second and third lockdown, and the time when you need the most support in your life, to be put in that lockdown was really harmful. And I went through my own depression. And then the other thing I love is poetry. So that ended up in this book, Darker Than Dark, is my poetry, my writing, my mindfulness all came together to create a book that is based on the vision that I had on my darkest day. That was my rock bottom day. And this poem works right through to full color in how to use mindfulness and color together with my poetry, my photography, all together in one book, that brought that about. That this was my journey of healing. And then I thought I need something more cheerful. So I followed on with mindfulness with flowers. I've got a list of these I want to do, a whole series, but these
Oh,
are the
wow.
first two out. And that was when I was like, oh, there's so many good photos in here of flowers. Like, how can I just choose one as the cover photo? I didn't know which one to choose. So that's why I've chosen 12 of them to go onto notebook covers. So these can then, so all keeping them all the same size. We've got like mix and match sets. So this is me going into creativity as my healing journey.
Wow. Really interesting. But what I really like how what you were talking about there in regards to like the creativity, how you're pushing that forward, like it's like being able to kind of resonate and recognize what someone else is going through because you've been through it yourself or been something through similar. Whereas if you don't kind of have that sort of, you haven't been through these setbacks, you'll never know how to maybe help someone who may also be going through it.
Absolutely. And so it took a long time, certainly with my son, for me to get to that point of recognizing why he was stuck there, why he needed to move forward. And when I finally came up with that, if I just show brief down here, when I said he couldn't understand his emotions because he couldn't see them, this is probably the simplest looking but the greatest creativity of my life, is coming up with a diagram of the emotional cycle.
Okay.
And that, so we talk about happy being a high emotion, high vibration, sad and angry, like the fight and flight, and then depression, being in the pit, stuck in a rock bottom. And everything you do with art and creativity will reflect this somewhere in your color choices as well. This I know this will resonate a lot with you, Amy.
Yeah, definitely. No, I get where you're coming from on that.
So it was giving him a map of his emotions that he could see his way. And the reason why being in depression wasn't the end of the world, it was like feeling low, but in a cycle, you know, when we say the only way is up, it was giving him the map of how to find his way back up. And we talk about light at the end of the tunnel and understanding that he had to go through and process whatever had made him sad or angry to work back up to happy. And realizing we change between emotions because something changed, whether it's inner change in ourselves, thoughts, feelings, and beliefs, or things that change in the world around us. And so to me, this of all things that I've created, took me 2 years to develop this. And you say, and then now we've been through that. This is the book Brain Unchained, is there to support other people. And certainly for people who are artistic and like to deal with emotions as well, there's a lot in here would support them too in understanding that.
Cool. And I suppose with that as well, like being a bit more visual, it would help like more people who are autistic on ADHD spectrum, sort of like that, because you can point as to that color makes sense to me because whereas sometimes I feel myself sometimes like being able to kind of verbally communicate something or put that out, it can be very complex, and some people just cross wires, it gets really complicated, whereas if you're using color and things like that, sometimes it just makes more sense.
Yeah. When you think in the English dictionary, there's over 6,000 words for emotions. Wow. And most adults don't even know all 6,000 words.
That is mad.
But when like art, every painting in the world starts with the same primary colours. And those same 3 primary colours are the same three core emotions plus light and dark. So, you know, we're talking about blue as sadness, but it's like everything from lighter feelings of thought and consideration right down to deep grief before we hit the depression, you know. And it's the same with the red is things that we love. We'll either fight for them or fight against them, you know, and it's that fight side. We fight for things we love and we fight against things we hate. And that's all the red side. But when you're doing something artistic, that colour graduates. But it's still the same primary colours, even when we talk about everything emotionally.
And I don't know if you've thought about maybe as well, like in terms of, do you know when like you're marketing and putting yourself out there, I suppose you won't call it marketing, branding, all that sort of stuff. That's really important there, isn't it, half the time? Because I find like I use a lot of like pinks and things like that. And what pink is associated to is more love, it's all that sort of stuff and things like that. So when you've put that, if that's on like your logo, it shows you more about who you are as a person, to put it forward so people maybe know to start to trust like you and all that sort of stuff. And it helps with that. I don't know if you've ever thought about that in that sort of way as well.
100%. If there's anything in this world that can be thought of emotionally, I've already kind of processed it to get it into this diagram with the dynamics of it absolutely spot on. I mean, I actually watched all 8 seasons of Game of Thrones, and every single episode, every moment, I was studying everything and thinking, was there anything that could challenge the diagram? It's like, you know, I've watched loads of people on YouTube, like Tony Robbins, Ralph Smart, Sadhguru, and loads of the top, you know, emotional awareness people and spiritual people and the motivational speakers. And I was like, if I could break this cycle in any way, it wasn't worth me delivering it. And so I really did spend 2 years developing it and another year trying to absolutely bust it apart before I ended up writing the book. And so, yeah, I was really determined to get this spot on. So, yeah.
So as we go on to like the community aspect, one of my other questions to you then now is in terms of like what you have been through and like what you're doing now. So how would you define community? And obviously we know the ways that you are helping yours, but yeah, how would you define that community that you're trying to build?
Well, for me, community is being human.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
are a community as a whole globally. But at the same time, there are niche communities within that, like supporting teenagers. But for me, I want to build that community around the adults supporting teenagers and young adults through neurodivergent depression, which is kind of based on the niche where my son had his struggle growing up with autistic spectrum disorder, with the suicidal depression, the overwhelm, the meltdowns, and everything. You know, we went through the lot. And so, as humans, when we talk about community, we exist in three places, and that is at home, in education, and in work. And if we're not in those, we're classed as homeless, uneducated, and out of work.
Yeah.
And it's pretty much where, as humans, we kind of just coexist. And so, for me to take this strategy and you know all of my strategies to people by for home is parents. Parenting teenagers and young adults is my first sort of community I'm looking to build.
Yeah.
And well, I am already building on Facebook and YouTube. And also I'm now getting into talking to schools,
Yeah,
educations, colleges, you
definitely.
know, places where they're supporting anybody in education,
Hmm.
usually high school and college, university area. Primary school, I want to tackle a little bit later down the line. And then there's workplaces, so like leadership skills, management
Love
courses,
that.
workshops. So for me, it's just like I can divide community into three very simplistic areas in terms of that's how humans exist, and that's how we're going to get to everybody as much as possible with this strategy going forward.
Mm. No,
Um,
well, over these last few days, I've been talking about accessibility, and that's basically you have kind of hit the nail on the head in terms of reaching out to those people, going to those people. If we don't go to those people or those organizations, etc., if they can't get to you, then the product or service that you were trying to put out there, it's never going
yeah,
to work, is it? It's got to be you reaching out to them, you going to those people, and that's how it then starts to make a difference.
yeah, absolutely. Oh, and the other one that I am approaching, and I'm already in talks with people, is therapy rooms,
Oh,
because
nice.
obviously the world is full of trauma and
Yeah, yeah.
people aren't able to process their emotions. They're going to therapy, and this is a great set of tools that people can use in addition to their existing therapy models. For those that are very, and honestly, I hear so many therapists that say that some of the worst clients that they would get, the deepest depression, are those that they find the hardest to help, because if they're not in touch with those emotions and they can't explain them,
Don't
how
get
can the
it.
therapist help them to process those emotions? And they
Yeah,
very often end up letting go of the clients that need them the most. And we want to change that. That shouldn't be like that.
yeah.
That is
And it's
absolutely
getting
not
like
happen.
those other people, I suppose, with if you're going out to those communities, whether it be a workplace, whether it be a school, in order to help them to recognize those signs in the first place, because they might be maybe teaching someone or they might come across someone and they're thinking, well, yeah, they seem okay, but if they're not okay, it gives them a chance to have that conversation with them. If they recognize the signs, they're more inclined probably to help them and reach out and support them in the way that they need in order to thrive and
Yeah.
just progress in life.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you, Amy.
No,
Um,
no, no, it's great. No, it's really nice to kind of have a conversation where when you're speaking about certain things all the time, even though it might not exactly be the same sort of subject, it's themes that span off that, like mindfulness, etc., creativity, the way that sparks more conversations with people, important conversations. Yeah, it's just really nice to kind of another person who kind of understands where you're coming from. So that's really cool. So in terms of then the last sort of pillar that I usually talk about, which is creativity. So when it comes to sharing your voice and your experiences with what you've been through, whether it be yourself or your son, what made you start writing all this in the first place? Is it literally just from the experiences both yourselves have been through, or are there other sorts of things that have happened as well?
Well, yeah, I mean, it sort of all stems from the moment where, after 12 years of suicidal depression, it was that night where I literally sat in the car with my son. He was suicidal again. I was ready to call a mental health unit. And then it was just like a light bulb went off in my head when I said he can't understand his emotions because he can't see them.
Yeah.
And I literally started writing squares and colours on a piece of paper that night and using it to draw his emotional language out so that I could talk to him on his terms. So it was like getting creative with the conversation.
Love that. Love that.
So there was the voice, there was the colour, there was the words, it was bringing it all together. And literally he changed so much within weeks and months, certainly within a couple of months. One of his friends sat down and went, "Oh, I've realised that hanging around with Matt makes me a better person." I was like, hang on, he'd been helping friends off the back of this. And I was like,
Wow.
I need to do something with this and I have to keep developing it. And so it really kept driving me to do it. So now it is just recognising that, we talk about emotional intelligence a lot. It's a word that's become quite popular in recent years. But there are actually 5 levels to emotional intelligence.
Okay.
That's the top tier. But awareness is the first level. And although it gets mentioned briefly, it's kind of assumed that most people are going into personal development have already got that level of awareness. And that it kind of focuses more on the top 3 tiers. But there was a massive gap in that bottom level in emotional awareness. And as I started to comprehend what emotional intelligence was and what these tiers were, I realized that that's where my niche was, and to get my voice out through there to underpin everything else. So I'm not in competition with anything. I'm not pushing anybody out.
No,
What I do
exactly.
literally supports everything.
I love that.
Everybody.
I love that, because that's the thing. It's okay to, when you are doing your thing, you think, oh, that person's doing that, that person's doing that. But I found very, like, just over these last few years, that actually when it is that, like yourself, where you've got like, these are my strategies, this is what I connect with, this is what I'm inspired by, you have a whole, I don't know what's the word, like you've got like a whole story that is just you. And no matter what people, if people try to copy it, if people try to be you, they'll never be you, because they won't put it out there like you, or there's just no way.
No, definitely not. I mean, it gave me some emotional battles myself sometimes. I'm like, oh, I've actually come up with something nobody else has ever come up with.
Yeah, it gets you dead excited, doesn't it?
I developed this.
Yeah.
I'm not copying anybody. I developed this because nobody else had it to teach me when I needed it to help my son.
Yeah.
And it did give me some internal battles about how do I go from reinventing from being an office worker to being an emotional awareness expert. It was just like a self-led journey, and just that drive to, I've developed this. What do I do with it? Do I let it go? Do I just continue with it? But no, the answer was always in subconscious. I have to keep going with this. It's needed.
Yeah, definitely. And honestly, this conversation has proved just that. So as we come towards the end of this week's wonderful conversation, it's been great. Any sort of words of encouragement, words of wisdom that you'd like to leave us off with?
I think for me, the biggest answer I ever had was never give up. Whatever happened in life, whether it was my son, whether it's been with my own challenges since, because I've had a lot of health issues last few years, and this book has saved my life since. And so, a whole different story. So for me, it's never give up, because you may not have found the answers through the route you're going, whether it is through doctors, GPs, schools, therapists, or whether it is through courses, training, mentoring, whatever you're doing. If you haven't found the answers yet, you haven't found the right person. Or maybe the answer is already within you. Keep looking.
No, I love that. That is such a great wise words, I must admit. No, that's really great. But yeah, it's such a great conversation today, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Amy.